Surgery, surgery, surgery. There were problems, in fact, there were three. Pain and infection we have done. That just leaves the other one. Stop this song, I know you are pleading, 'cause you want to do some silent reading. But the answer this song is leading, 'cause the other problem it was bleeding. Oh, you knew it. Welcome, Year 11. Video number 3 on surgery. There's only 4, so you've only got a couple more to suffer. This one is on the problem of bleeding. As you can see, I have my asking hat. This will be going on at various times during the video, asking you a couple of questions. When you see the hat, pause the video, see if you can answer the question. Here we go. So, the third and final problem which needed to be solved was bleeding. Pain, 1840s. Infection, 1860s. Bleeding, asking hat on. When did they begin to solve the problem of bleeding? Da, da, da. Well, hopefully, we said round about 1900. So here we go. What problems did bleeding cause in surgery? Problem number 1. If there's too much blood during the operation, the surgeon can't see, and maybe the surgeon might make a mistake, which could lead to death. So that's one problem. Second problem. Sometimes bleeding can lead to a loss of blood pressure. If blood pressure goes down, the heart rate diminishes, and it can lead to heart problems and death. So bleeding needed to be tackled after pain and infection. Now, historically, go back into history. There were 2 ways of controlling bleeding. Do you know what they are? Have a think. Asking the question. Well, you've had a few seconds there. Go right back to the 1500s. A man called Ambrose Paré comes up with the red hot cautery iron. Yes, it stopped bleeding, but it caused so much pain that sometimes patients died from the shock. The red hot cautery iron. And the second way of stopping bleeding? Ligatures, using silk thread to tie the veins or the arteries. Yes, it stopped bleeding, but before Pasteur and Lister, germs caused infection, which could cause death. So they needed something else for bleeding. Now, the best thing of all, of course, would somehow be to replace the blood that has been lost. We call that today transfusions. And through the 1700s and 1800s, they did transfusions. Sometimes the patients died, sometimes they lived. Do you know why? Unbelievably, sometimes they used animal to human transfusions. Asking hat on. Here's a nice easy one for you. Who made the massive breakthrough regarding bleeding? Any ideas? You couldn't find a scientist who was finer than Karl Landsteiner. Oh, just thought of that. Superb. Karl Landsteiner, 1900, 1901, 1902. Uses science and technology to discover the 4 blood groups, O, A, B, and AB. And that breakthrough, ladies and gentlemen, allows better transfusions. So you could do more complicated, complex operations. And instead of the patient bleeding to death, eventually, like we have today, you can replace the lost blood. So it is a start moving towards solving the problem of bleeding. But there were problems. Number one, the donor had to be present right next to the person who was receiving the blood. So transfusions had to be limited. So immediately, Landsteiner's work only had a smaller effect, not the huge impact that it's had since. How did that later develop? Well, in the following video, when I'm discussing factors, one of the factors I will discuss is war. Now, Landsteiner's work, 1900, 1901, 1902. A few years later, World War I. Many, many thousands of soldiers injured, needed blood transfusions. Difficult to get the blood to the trench. Difficult to get donors. So therefore there's a problem. They needed to come up with a way of storing the blood. 1915, a man called Lewishon, Lewishon, developed something called sodium citrate. Stops the blood from clotting. They could store the blood and use it later. Save thousands of lives. A man also building on the work of Lewishon, a man called Weil, Weil. He later develops a system whereby the blood can be refrigerated, so it will last even longer. The technology beginning to play a part. And the final crew, two men, Rouse and Turner, come up with citrate glucose solution. Stores the blood for even longer. It was extensively used in 1917, just before a major battle, the Battle of Cambrai. So war played a part there in developing Landsteiner's original work. So when war is over, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, as science and technology develop, Landsteiner has done the key work. People have added to it, so that when we come to our more modern surgery today, we have successful transfusions. Pain is sorted, infection is sorted, blood loss is sorted. The three key areas have been developed and solved. Surgery has become better. Great news. That's why we all live longer today, on average, because we can have successful, quite extensive, complicated, complex operations. Surgery sorted. So, hopefully now you've looked at pain, infection, bleeding. Doesn't matter which one comes up on the exam, because you should be able to answer. You've got the knowledge. Occasionally, in the surgery exam, they don't necessarily ask about pain, infection, or bleeding. They pick a factor and they ask you to analyse that. So just in case that turns up on the exam, the next video I will do will all be about factors. Make sure you watch it. All the best, Year 11. Speak to you soon. Cheers.